Ashok ji, you can start.
Tar Meher Baba ki Jai. The seven realities: existence, love, sacrifice, renunciation, knowledge, control, and surrender. I give no importance to creed, dogma, caste, or the performance of religious ceremonies and rites, but to the understanding of the following. 1. The only real existence is that of the one and only God, who is the self in every finite self. 2. The only real love is the love for this infinity God, which arouses an intense longing to see, know, and become one with its truth, God. 3. The only real sacrifice is that in which, in pursuance of this love, all things, body, mind, position, welfare, even life itself, are sacrificed. 4. The only real renunciation is that which abandons, even in the midst of worldly duties, all selfish thoughts and desires. 5. The only real knowledge is the knowledge that God is the inner dweller in good people and in so called bad, in saint and in so called sinner. This knowledge requires you to help all equally as circumstances demand without expectation of reward. When compelled to take part in a dispute, to act without the slightest trace of enmity or hatred, to try to make others happy with brotherly or sisterly feeling for each one, and to harm no one in thought, word, or deed, not even those who harm you. 6. The only real control is the discipline of the senses to abstain from indulgence in low desires, which alone ensures absolute purity of character. 7. The only real surrender is that in which poise is undisturbed by any adverse circumstance, and the individual, amidst every kind of hardship, is resigned with perfect calm to the will of God. Given by Meher Baba in 1952. Avatar Meher Baba ki Jai. Thank you, Karthik.
Thank you, Ashok ji. So, uske saath we can see where we are. So, we have done up to page 178. We are getting into session number um, 9, ninth reading of this book. It's not 178, no? Do you 58 once? Maybe my saving didn't work. Oh, there it is. Wayfaring in Spain. Right. So, any thoughts before we get started? Mama ji, you were not there a couple of weeks. So, hope all well. Okay, so let me get started. Can you hear me and see the screen?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, we can see the screen.
Okay, let me get started and read for a bit. Wayfaring in Spain. After a month at Portofino, Baba sailed for India, but within 2 months, he was en route again to Europe. During this trip, most of his attention was concentrated upon Spain, where he visited Avila, the birthplace of Saint Teresa and Saint John of the Cross. During the 24 hours spent there, the group fasted with Baba as an expression of love for the great souls who had made the town renowned. No one was permitted to touch Baba during this period. So swift was the spiritual current with which he was then charged. In Spain, as in all the countries he visits, Baba wished to contact the masses. In Madrid, where he went from a villa, he and the group tramped the streets all day until their aching feet rebelled. Baba chose particularly to stand in the central square, Puerta del Sol, among the crowds. Sometimes, as they walked through the thoroughfare, despite the fact that Baba wore European clothes and a Spanish beret, which concealed his long hair and made him look quite normal, people would turn and stare at him as if drawn by something beyond their conscious mind. This, Baba explained to the group, was due to the powerful nature of the internal work he was then performing. Instinctively, the crowd must have felt it, because at other times he would attract no special attention. When we realized that this tour was made shortly before the outbreak of the Spanish War, it seems probable that the master was stirring up the karmic forces in the unconscious of the Spanish people, which with them, as with all nations, must be expiated through suffering before the beneficial effects of redemption can be experienced. One afternoon, they climbed a high hill opposite Madrid. Here they sat around Baba beneath the shade of a large olive tree while he spoke to them of the future and of the part they would play in his coming world work. On this beautiful sunlit hill, as they sat circled about the master, time seemed to roll away. The scene might have been in Palestine with Jesus, or in Vrindavan with Krishna, or in the race's childhood before man had learned to record for posterity the manifestation of Godhood in human form. The world all about them, so intent in its pursuit of false values, seemed unreal and dreamlike. Only this moment out of time, in the presence of one who dwells continually in eternity, was real, had meaning. Always, in fact, the rest of the phenomenal universe seems lost, and well, lost when one is in Baba's transcendent presence. The day they arrived in Barcelona, a special delegate from Madrid was being greeted by the city officials. Baba was delighted to be among the vast throngs of people who gathered to watch the great procession of all the notables of the district. The circumstance which marked the scene of the new federal state was highly important politically and provided essential stage setting for the subsequent upheaval in the Spanish government. This was this was but one of the many coincidences which highlighted their journeys through Europe with Baba. Frequently, at the moment of his arrival in a place, a parade or an important festival would be in full swing, giving him additional opportunity to achieve his magnetic contact work with the masses. When man has lost his spiritual contact with the impersonal God, as in this present day, then the personal aspect must not only take human form, but use human contacts to recharge the spiritual consciousness of mankind. Another shrine, sanctified by the living devotion of a Christian saint, which Baba visited, was Montserrat, associated with the legend of the Holy Grail and Saint Ignatius. While there, he predicted that at a later time, whether in his life or another, only Baba knows, the group would return and live there with him for a while. It must be apparent to any unbiased student of religious history that the avatar, whose mission is universal, works not only for the benefit of the generation in which he takes form, but of necessity for the many generations to follow. The new momentum which he gives to the race consciousness cannot possibly find full expression until, in the course of time, the power and wisdom of that primary impulsion is thoroughly assimilated by man and integrated into its conscious life. Though we may not comprehend the full significance of Baba's visits to these shrines of outstanding Christian saints, we can see how a continuity of transcendent consciousness is maintained by recalling the spiritual attainments of these great souls and linking them to the new realizations which the Master brings. Seeds planted by Jesus may only now be coming to fruition. And a Teresa, Saint Francis, or Ignatius may have been the precursors of large groups of sainted human beings. Saying farewell to Baba was especially poignant after the happy week the group had had with him. Two devotees from Zurich were waiting for them when they arrived at Marseilles. So exceptional was the flow of love and power from Baba at this time that the newcomers felt the ecstatic uplift of it for days afterward. At noon, just before sailing, the group gathered around Baba in his cabin. As always, at such moments, the atmosphere was pregnant with silence and heartache. The divine presence was withdrawing his physical body from them again, preparing them gradually for the ultimate withdrawal, which would someday initiate the inner realization of union with his universal self. In contrast to their heavy hearts, outside on the dock, a light-hearted youth played a gay tune on the concertina. Even in the depths of sadness, the sound of joy was heard. So I think it was one of the very interesting and gripping passages as we joined Baba through Spain. I really loved the way she describes the events that happened there. But I feel Jean Adriel is very sorted on the big picture, right? So she goes to the specifics. She's does the role of a biographer very well, but at no time she loses sight of who is she writing the life story of. She does not. She gives the adequate importance. She also brings out the cosmological phenomenon, possibly linked, even if Baba has not mentioned it. So I think I like her style. And yeah, any comments before we continue? Oh,
No, yeah, continue. We are listening.
sure, sure. No, it's been silent, so I'm wondering if everybody's around.
Yeah.
Okay, lightning.
Karthik, I think it is enlightening, and it also shows that Baba has his own way of he was doing his internal work even when he was. I mean, there's this world of duality and reality again and again. It comes out that even while he's
Yeah,
walking, and I think that is
correct. Correct, Ashok, including Jill. He was
yes,
working with her also. See?
yes,
That's why
absolutely.
he ended up writing also. Yeah, there we go.
I think so beautifully, yes. Great. Lightning visits westward. Upon returning to India, Baba moved his headquarters from Nasik to Mehrabad. Here, he remained practically in seclusion, seeing visitors for a few hours only, one day a week. On the 9th of June 1934, he sailed again for Europe on his seventh visit. After stopping in Paris for 3 days and in London for 6, he traveled to Zurich. He spent one of his 10 days here in seclusion on a mountain top, with his group watching from a nearby peak. Suddenly, a heavy rainstorm descended upon them, drenching them to the skin. As they looked over toward the mountain where Baba sat, they were amazed to see him encircled in golden light with no sign of rain touching his person. Interesting. He arrived in Bombay on August 2nd, and in November of that year, he left for his eighth visit to Europe. His arrival in London coincided with the wedding of the Duke and Duchess of Kent. The streets, of course, were crowded with light-hearted spectators and afforded Baba another opportunity to work with the masses as he drove past Buckingham Palace and through Hyde Park to the West End. On the 5th of December 1934, he sailed for New York, his first visit to America since that memorable parting in the spring of 1932. In the meantime, while our friends were being quickened by periodic contacts with the Master, Malcolm and I were struggling with the problem of physical existence. He trying to build up a clientele for his style business, I trying to achieve physical health. Dependence upon medicine and surgery I had long ago abandoned, but I was still trying the newer forms of electrotherapy and physical manipulation, as well as every conceivable kind of diet. For a while, I would experience some improvement, then would follow a relapse, which would lead me to a new method, a new doctor, a new ray of hope. One of these diets necessitated my having freshly pressed vegetable juices every 2 hours from 7 in the morning until 9 at night. I was unable to prepare them, so Malcolm would arise at daybreak, squeeze out my quota of juices for the day, get his own breakfast, wash himself and the dishes, and then start out with his bag of tithe. At night, on his return, he would prepare his dinner, clean the dishes and the rooms, and retire about midnight. It was not exactly a holiday for either of us. I was well aware of the technique of spiritual healing, having at numerous times in my past life experienced the release of God power by this means. But now I felt intuitively that my bodily pain and disorder were the byproduct of a deeper spiritual cleansing. Having karmically incurred the violence of surgery, I had now to expiate in the body the results of that karma. For many years, I had epitomized my spiritual life ideal in the phrase resurrection of the body. In fact, one of the glimpses of reality, big R reality, which had been vouchsafed me, had revealed how the inner forces were even then at work, draining off the old lifeblood to make way for the new, in order that the ideal of resurrections might someday be realized. Then Baba came into my life, and for a number of years it seemed as though the draining part of the process would never cease. I finally understood, however, and it was corroborated later by Baba, that these years of illness and depletion were simply evidences in the physical body of the prophylactic measures which the spiritual forces were using to effect a true resurrection of the entire being. Because freedom from pain does not necessarily betoken spiritual health. It may, on the contrary, signify spiritual stagnation. It is entirely possible to use the law, in quotes, to impress upon the universal mind whatever we may conceive to be right and proper for us. And certainly, physical health would seem to be the birthright of every man. I still believe it is, that if we have come to the place in our evolution where we desire something more than mere physical well being, if we really desire that the God self should become the controlling center of our being, of our lives, then we must be willing to give up our mental concept of how our life ideal shall be attained. The higher law, the law of love, seems to require that we enter into the mind of Christ and with him say, Father, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not my will, but thine be done. And repeat that line. Father, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not my will, but thine be done. So that's the make of the last paragraph. So is it surrender and have the conviction, and in that surrender given to whatever is, I mean, have an acceptance of whatever is happening in your life. That's what one makes of this. Okay, let's continue. This realization came to me most forcibly about a year after we arrived in Hollywood. I had reached what seemed to be the abyss of physical pain and weakness. My case was diagnosed as a complication of various things, which included cancer, tuberculosis, and Bright's disease. They had no money for the expensive treatments which were recommended, nor did I feel inclined to give much credence either to the diagnosis or to the suggested remedy. I made the decision to give up all the treatments except the one of contacting Baba inwardly and feeling his presence permeating me through every nerve and cell. This brought me moments of great joy and peace, but I continued to grow weaker. Only with great effort could I raise my hand. I seemed to be losing hold of the body rapidly. Finally, in the midst of constant pain, I dropped off to sleep one night from sheer exhaustion. About 4 in the morning, I awakened to the sense of pain again. I thought of Baba and inwardly talked to him about the situation. I told him I was content to stay in the body or give it up as he might decree. Having completely abandoned myself to his will, the God, will in me, I felt a deep sense of peace in spite of the continual pain. Gradually, dawn came with the first stirring of wind in the leaves. A holy breath seemed to stir within me. I had the impression of great weight having been lifted from me. A wall of new life had opened within. As the sun poured its first rays through the tree foliage, ecstasy poured through me, and for a couple of hours, I basked in the radiance of this inner sunrise. I had not been able to move about the room for a month or more, but now I arose room. Sitting on the window sun, I told him what had happened. Healing brought not only physical strength and release from pain, but for many days I experienced that stillness of mind which I had known some years before at a time of inner quickening. That it was the activity of divine love, I had no doubt. This was verified some months later in a letter from Baba in which he said, referring to the healing, everything else may fail, love never fails. This healing was not, however, the final one. There were still deeper layers of the unconscious to be activated and cleansed. A more complete abandonment of self will and self desire to be experienced. I was still far from that ultimate capitulation which must precede the resurrection into the life of eternity. In proportion to the degree of my surrender, I had been released from the effects of my past actions and thoughts. A block of these age old impressions had been wiped away through the grace of the Master. There was more house, more
Yeah,
bonds
I
to
am.
be broken.
Yeah, Jai
Like
Baba.
St. Paul.
I am amazed by the last couple of sentences that she gets this realization. After that experience of
Mm,
Tessie of
mm.
maybe
Love healing.
whatever these words are not used, but kind of realization that I am one with him, man. You get that feeling of oneness and enlightenment inside. And then
Mm.
she's writing that she has resurrected from her one life to another life within one life, of course. That's beautiful, actually. That
Very beautiful.
getting that conviction,
Resurrecting into the life of
yeah,
eternity. That's
and
what she
getting that
seems to.
conviction, and such a conviction that she writes about it. That's beautiful. Jai Baba.
Yeah, very beautiful. I
Transformational.
think
Jai Baba.
correct, correct. And obviously, you need a gift to be able to write like this. A and B to recount something that probably happened years back with the clarity and the level of detail, apart from the beautiful language. To put it all together in this fashion is not
Yeah, completely
without
agree.
the gift,
Completely
right?
agree.
So
Yeah,
yeah,
Jai
yeah.
Baba.
So he's obviously been gifted to write it like this so beautifully years later after she went through these experiences. Yeah. So I'll just repeat the last two lines. In fact, I'll repeat this paragraph. This healing was not, however, the final one. There were still deeper layers of the unconscious to be activated and cleansed. A more complete abandonment of self will and self desire to be experienced. I was still far from that ultimate capitulation which must precede the resurrection into the life of eternity. In proportion to the degree of my surrender, I had been released from the effects of my past actions and thoughts. These age-old impressions had been wiped away through the grace of the master, but there was still more house cleaning to be done, more bonds to be broken. Like Saint Paul, I had to continue to die daily without rebellion, without concern for the outcome. Again, I don't know what the reference to Saint Paul's experience of having to die daily. By the way, die daily is in quotes. I don't know what the reference is. It's obviously a Christian slash biblical, I mean, post biblical uh, reference.
Yeah. I,
Yeah.
I love the word housekeeping. So
Yeah.
when we casually meet, what's up? So probably a good answer could be, I'm just busy housekeeping. So which covers up everything. The waste papers in your home, your mind and body and soul. That's the continuous thing to do, housekeeping. Making
Something,
making ourselves cleaner and cleaner. Yeah, Baba.
yeah, absolutely.
Eternally, we are housekeeping, and he's the eternal housekeeper. Huh?
Yeah, Jay Baba. I was thinking that since the past paragraph is so profound, uh, at least can we highlight that?
Why not?
Can just go to the earlier paragraph. This up to the point, more bonds to be broken.
Bonds to be broken.
This is really. I mean,
Oh, by the way, what she's saying here as her experiences. Um, Nobody has had in this group personal contact with her, right? She's gone very early, right? Sanjayji, you anybody you've heard who have
No,
met
no, no,
Jean and so
no,
on?
no, no,
No, right?
no.
Yeah,
He was not.
yeah.
Yeah.
You're the oldest link anyway for us, and of course Sunil, but he's been
Okay.
out of geographic uh, connectivity for a while.
I think she went
Anyway,
much early. Yeah.
yeah. She. I think we read in the
46 or some 50, 50s, I suppose. We can check that.
50s.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Check
50s, yeah. I think she like 50s, yes. Um, okay, let's continue. The metaphysical viewpoint, which insists that physical health, material well being, and prosperity are the legitimate prerogatives of any man, may be true. Consider the physical body and its desires as the paramount issue in life. If, however, we think of the body merely as an important instrument to be properly cared for, but not pampered, and the inner non-physical entity, L biggest self, the true big L life, then our focus of attention is turned away from preoccupation with the body's desires to the yearnings of that inner biggest self. It may be God's will that the perfection of the inner life, big L, manifests itself in a perfected body. But this becomes of secondary importance to the soul that seeks the supreme goal, union with God. Body consciousness has no place in such realization. So, interesting. Again, beautiful uh, language and coverage in the last. Like I said, what I like about this book is she rarely strays from the core ontology and core message of Baba, discourses, divine theme. Wherever we have seen snippets of references to that, you see that she's very, very solid and very, very clear from a communication perspective on how she links back the events, how she has drawn those understandings and applied them in her life, right? So I like that part very much, right? Okay, so why don't we rotate the reading a little bit? Anybody wants to volunteer to read? Whoever is in a position to do so.
Yeah, I'll do. Yeah. Just a minute.
Reunion, yes, please. Jai Baba.
Jai Baba. Finally, after 2.5 years of being ready to join Baba at a moment's notice, he came to us again in Hollywood. And for 3 wonderful weeks, we were recharged by his radiant presence. At this time, I verified many of my intuitions concerning the experiences we had undergone. The constant disappointments, the broken promises, the long period of his apparent unconcern with our problems were all for the purpose of testing our resilience, of developing in us the capacity to endure tension. Baba is the great destroyer of illusion. All of, and if our illusions include erroneous ideas about himself, these too he relentlessly destroys. If a disciple is to be of use to a master, he must, of course, be firm as a rock and at the same time be fluid as water. This is a beautiful sentence. Yeah. In Baba's words, you must be able to face disappointment, criticism, negative forces with perfect calm and inner peace, and you must submit yourself at all times to the will of God.
It's inner poise.
Yes. Inner poise, according to Beams, is one of the two things that are required for spiritual progress. What is the other? In the
Yes.
context of the avatar and perfect master, he brings out the two ingredients that help the jivatma in his journey. One, he says, is inner poise. The second is adjustment with the environment. And he
Yeah.
says the perfect master is part of the environment for everyone other than Baba. Because for Baba, he did not have a perfect master as part of environment. So he did it by himself. So the role of the perfect master is so important in our journey because he is part of environment. And either the perfect master or the avatar, if they are not aligned, or rather you are not aligned to either or one of them, then you are going to be in trouble because you are basically in dissonance with environment. You may have inner poise, you may have academic understanding of nature of true values and the nature of false values, but you are not as aligned to the creative universe, and the creative universe and the environment around you includes the perfect master. Beautiful.
Mhm.
So what was your point, Ashok? I went off on a tangent, sorry. From inner poise, what did you want to say?
No, he said peace, so it is inner, instead of inner peace, it's poise. That's about all.
Oh, okay, yeah, sorry. Okay, sure.
But
Please
anyway,
continue.
inner peace also is a part of leading to inner poise.
Correct. You see, without peace, you're not getting it.
Yeah, yeah. Poise is
Good point.
also poise. I also take it as a verb, that you have to focus yourself to keep yourself at poise, and then slowly it becomes your nature, and then you arrive at that peace, which is the final, I take it like that. Yeah, Jai Baba. Let me go
Good
ahead.
point. Good point. It's
Yeah,
a trait to be developed,
yeah,
and it comes in flashes.
yes,
We are able to experience that and say, yeah, no, we should look at the true values. We should be
yeah,
unmoved by good or bad. All of that happens in
yes,
flashes. But
yeah,
sustaining that, like you said, making
yeah,
the verb into a noun and a state and an adjective
yes,
for constantly determining you is a
yes.
process.
Yeah.
Good one.
All that we had gone through and had to experience was part of the process which linked to us closer to Him, the divine personality. Just as Jesus said, I am the way, and no cometh to the Father except through me. So today, the perfect master Baba offers himself as the divine intermediary who shall unite our consciousness with the soul of the universe.
Okay,
Chapter
passage to
6,
India. Next chapter.
Passage to India. Yeah. On January 18, 1935, after a month's visit, Baba left Hollywood for India to remain there this time for about 2 years. He was in seclusion during this period and fasted most of the time, first in the Abu Mountains and later at Mehrabad. A new cabin erected for him on the hill signified the inception of a new phase of his work. The groundwork was being laid to unite the Eastern and Western groups. In the spring 1936, we heard the, the faint whispers of some new plans of Baba's, which would include many of the Westerners. And in the autumn of that year, we were called to India. At last, the long awaited summons had come. Our joy knew no bounds. Then we began to wonder how we would get there. We found we would be required to have round trip tickets as a substantial letter of credit to ensure our entry into India. And though the Thai business was now quite flourishing, it would not provide for such an extensive outlay. Once in India, Baba would take care of Malcolm's and my living expenses. Again, however, we were to learn that when the master wishes something accomplished, the ways and means are always forthcoming. This time, the manna from heaven descends, descended upon us through the loving generosity of our friend Garrett Ford, who had met Baba when he came to Hollywood the second time, and since then had been anticipating the moment which he too might join the master in India. Happily, for all of us, he was among those included in the Indian trip, and when he heard about it, he immediately offered to take care of our tickets. A week or so later, word came from Baba asking Garrett if he would do what already he had volunteered to do his own accord. We were all very happy about it. On the 22nd of October, Malcolm and I were on our trip to New York, and a few days later, a party of 8 of us sailed on the Ile de France for England. Garrett having some business to wind up, followed a few weeks later with Countess Nadia Tolstoy. By the way, there is a book which is coming on Nadia. Yeah. In London, we experienced the great joy of seeing Baba again. He had arrived there just 2 days in advance of our party, and 2 days later, he was on his way back to India with his Eastern disciples. This trip was the shortest yet of his journeys to the West. Every moment of his 4 days in London teemed with activity, dozens of interviews with loving devotees, heart hungry for another glimpse of Baba, and a few momentous meetings with newcomers, one of whom was Alexander Marquette, writer, stage and film director who had since dedicated his life to the service of the Master. Go on. On one of the 2 evenings which we had with Baba, we went with him to see Gary Cooper in Mr. Deeds Goes to Town. This is a movie, I suppose. Baba was greatly pleased with the picture and cited it as an outstanding example of how motion pictures may be used for uplifting of mankind while providing the utmost in enjoyable entertainment. One afternoon, we had a delightful tea with Baba at the apartment of one of the English group. Suddenly, in the midst of the laughter and joy, we noticed Baba's face drawn as if he's in great pain. Instantly, the group became silent as we shared in sympathy the unknown burden which was sensed he had assumed. Later, he explained, if you know the agony with thousands are suffering this moment in Spain, you would understand my pain. Another memory of this trip, one redolent with beauty, concerns an episode at Victoria Station in London as we were bidding Baba farewell. Wishing to soften the pain of parting with Baba, always shares with his loving ones. Two of his English group, in buying flowers for him, had selected about 2 dozen small bunches of violets in order that he might have some tangible evidence of his love. To leave with his sorrowful devotees. I shall never forget the look of tender appreciation which he turned upon Kitty and Margaret when he saw what they had done and recognized the selfless love which had prompted their act. Their thoughtfulness transmuted the pain of parting into sacrament of joy. Gently, slowly, Baba's sensitive fingers would pick out the fragrant symbols of his compassionate love and hand them to the devotees as they approached for a farewell embrace. One could see that a particular blessing accompanied such individual bouquet. Such gracious acts on the part of his disciples are deeply cherished by Baba. Baba had instructed the American group to sail for India a week after his departure and the English group to follow a few weeks later. Malcolm and I accordingly boarded the Ilsia at Liverpool the following week, and at Marcellus we joined by Norina Matchpally, Elizabeth Patterson, Ilse Gale, and her daughter Rano. Oh, Rano's mother. Okay. Jai Baba.
So Rano is Western. I did not realize
Rano
that. I
Gali.
thought she
Rano
was.
Gali was
Yeah.
Western.
So yeah, I thought she was somehow with the first name. I assumed that she was Parsi.
No, no. She was Rano Gali.
Yeah, yeah. American or maybe European, maybe.
European, I
Estelle
suppose.
Gailey. Yeah, Estelle
Yeah,
Gailey and daughter of Rano.
yeah.
Yeah. You want to rotate or
Okay.
you're good to read?
One. How long is this paragraph? Maybe this much.
Uh,
What is on the screen? I can read. Yeah, and then
yeah,
because we
please
will.
go ahead. Please go ahead. We'll have the next one take over.
East meets west, except for the landing at Marcellus, where we spent an enjoyable day wandering through the sidewalk market and the old town, and later at Port Said, which we had our first contact with the mysterious East. The journey seemed long and wearisome, intensified, no doubt, by our eagerness to be with Baba. Finally, when the long awaited day arrived, I felt as though everything of my past had been washed clean by the many waters through which we had sailed. Beautiful. We docked at Bombay on 8th of December, just as the sun was setting behind the domed skyline of the city. Rustam, whom we had met in Hollywood, came some years before, found us in the launch of the ship, and we embarrassed as in the as is the custom among Baba's people. While the stiff British army families looked on in utter disappointment,
Astonishment. Yeah.
astonishment. Rustam placed beautiful garlands of jasmine and red roses around our necks. Later, below deck, in Norina's cabin, we met some of Baba's other Indian men and a few of the women who were gaily attired in their colorful native saris. As we were greeted by these gracious and gentle women, I felt I was meeting very dear sisters whom I had known long ago. That's what happens when you another Baba lover meets when Baba loves.
Yes. Yes.
You have known us better for
I
ages.
remember the embrace in Doha, Qatar.
Jai
I know
Baba,
what went through my heart.
Jai Baba, Jai Baba. Love you.
Absolutely, Sanjay ji, it's a karmic connection.
Correct, correct.
Yes. 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 No, but the mind does not accept, right? But there's something funny happening, right?
Yes,
The
yes, that's
mind is still figuring it out, but
yes, yes.
it's sure there. She beautifully describes it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, Karthik,
Anyway,
mind and the heart, it's intuitive.
correct, 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 correct. Indeed. Are you in a position to read Ashok ji for some time?
Yes. Uh,
Please, you can continue from few of them.
okay. Few of them could speak English, nor we, of course, their language. But the deep love for our master, which had drawn us to India, also drew us to them and dissolved any superficial barriers. Later, on the dock, as we waited our turn at the customs, we met other members of Baba's spiritual family, all of whom extended to us the same warm, loving welcome. It was truly a heart feast, as many must have thought who watched this meeting of East and West. The customs were cleared with amazing rapidity, and our 60 or 70 pieces of group luggage were loaded onto trucks. Rustam saw to it that everything was executed with speed and precision. Then we were on our way in his car to the majestic hotel where we spent the night. Next
If I can
morning,
pause you for a minute,
yes,
in the previous paragraph here, there is a mention of Port Said. I am tempted to research this and I'll come back later with what I find. It looks like that's Port Said, Dubai. So till now, I know that Baba did stop at Sharjah, which is about 30 minutes from Dubai, at Sharjah airport on the way for a refueling stop, right? But of course, this is not Baba, but I'm guessing this is Port Said, Dubai.
Must, yeah,
Just
most it must be in the Middle East, definitely. This
Middle
word
East. Yeah,
Said
it
is
can't
a
be
surname,
Marseilles.
actually. It's a
Yeah, it
surname.
can't be
Yeah.
Marseilles. Yes,
Said is a
Port Said
surname.
is the king,
Yeah,
king's.
yeah.
I mean, the Sheikh Al Maktoum family. Yeah.
Other thing, probably you could look if you could find the YouTube link of the movie that was referred in the previous.
Mentioned, yes, yes, that's Baba giving a certificate for that movie. It makes it very important.
Yeah.
In fact, yeah. In fact, I'm reminded of another movie. It's a Sufi movie that I saw on YouTube. Uh, Very beautiful. Let me try to find that and share that as well. It's a movie that Joe from Arkansas told me about, and then I looked it up and I saw it online. Very, very beautiful movie. It's a short movie, 1 hour. Uh, Nothing. I mean, Baba is not mentioned. It's my recent movie, but that and this other movie that we just heard of, Mr. Deeds Goes to Town or whatever that was. We'll look it up. Yeah. Okay. Please continue, Ashok ji.
yeah, just talking about movies, we can add a movie called Judah Ben Hur, Benhur. That's
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
got
It's a famous
That's
biblical.
what Baba has seen. Baba has seen that movie. It's a very long movie, 4 hours or something.
yes.
Yeah.
Correct.
And
I,
maybe we should have a folder where we park the links of the movies that Baba has seen.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a very good point. So Baba saw the whole movie because Baba was also famous for not waiting through the whole movie most times, wherever it was, right? So he used to see,
Yes.
and once his work was done with mostly the crowd within the, I mean, we don't know what was his work, but yeah, he used to never stay right through the movie. That's what comes across. But Ben Hur,
Yes,
I
yes.
remember as a kid going and seeing it, and as you said, it's a very long movie. It has this famous Moses and the parting scene, this scene of parting of water, and obviously it's the Old Testament and all of that. But yeah, my memory fails me on the greater detail than that.
The next morning, as our escort drove us around the city, we passed through Malabar Hill, the beautiful residential section which overlooks the bay. We visited the Parsi Tower of Silence, where vultures consumed the dead bodies within a few moments of their being placed in the tower. We stopped at the leading motion picture studio, where Rustam, whose family owned motion picture theaters, was greeted like an old friend. Then we made our way through the bazaars where dirt, heat, color, music, odors of savory herbs, spicy perfumes, and hot bodies all blended into an unforgettable, exotic atmosphere which attracted, which both attracted and repelled. Women in flower-colored saris carried gleaming brass and copper bowls on their heads in a stately grace. Men strolled lazily about in dhotis and loincloths. Beggars in many stages of filth and human misery whined. Half-naked children with nose rings and silver anklets scampered about under, underfoot. Much human noise, much languid movement. By now the sun was high in the heavens, and languor poured through our veins too. The morning papers had carried news of our arrival and our photographs, with the result that we attended to our shopping. Crowds gathered around a car or waited for us outside the shops, curious no doubt to see the Westerners who had traveled across the world to sit at the feet of an Eastern master.
Yeah,
In
these
the
pictures are available actually. The team arriving and getting garlanded 1936 pictures are available. Yeah,
Oh,
Jai Baba.
okay.
I mean,
Okay.
still pictures. Yeah, Jai Baba.
Yeah, it's also interesting to notice that it's got local press coverage back in the day.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah.
in the last afternoon, we motored to Igatpuri, arriving there about 9 at night. Here, a bungalow had been lovingly prepared for us by Kaka and Adi, Baba's brother. We turned in early, grateful for a night's rest in the cool quiet of hilly country after the oppressive heat of Bombay. The next morning, just as we had finished breakfast, Baba arrived by car, and then we knew that we were really in India. He explained that an unavoidable delay in finishing the new quarters which he was having erected for us at Nasik would require us to stay for a while in some temporary abode. He selected Mandar Dara as a cooler and more comfortable place for us. 2 days later, we moved to this beautiful mountain paradise. Ashram Deluxe. While visit Asadigatpuri, Baba had sensed our inability to adjust quickly to the lack of modern conveniences prevalent in India. It was largely to reassure us that he arranged for us to see our new home at Nasik before going on to Bandara. Then he had described to us in London some of the outstanding features of the ashram. We were nonetheless deeply touched by his consideration for our needs, which was manifest everywhere in this modern Indian ashrams. A septic system of drainage had been installed, of which not even the richest of the 30,000 Nasik inhabitants could boast. Running hot and cold water had been piped to all the rooms, and neat little water coolers stood in the corner of our individual back porches. The rooms were furnished with modern maple wardrobes and bureaus of simple design. The box spring beds were upholstered with delft blue rep, each equipped with canopied mosquito netting. A writing table and chair sat beneath the window of each room. The walls were painted white with cream-colored woodwork and blue tiles. This new building, which was just being completed, comprised 12 moderate-sized rooms, all opening out onto one long veranda. Between each two was a shower and a toilet, and at the rear, connecting each pair of rooms, was a private porch with comfortable chairs.
Yeah, I've seen this accommodation in Nasik some time
Okay.
back. Yeah.
It's a public one. I mean, today
No, no,
it's
no. It was a private house which had a
okay.
bungalow in one corner. On one side, they had these rooms were all in
Guest
one line.
accommodation.
When
Interesting.
one line, and Baba had very specifically made sure that because these kind of arrangements were never there, right, neither for the monthly or any of the Indian disciples of his, and this was probably the earliest big Baba group
Understand.
that
Mm.
visited India for Baba, and Baba made sure that they were made comfortable. You can read that from the description. You can sense that, rooms and tables, chairs in the porch and all that, everything. Yeah.
Mm. Mm.
This somehow reminds me of NPR.
Yes, exactly what went through my mind as she was describing it, right? So
Correct,
that's
correct.
what I was coming up in my mind's eye.
And,
And I
and
went there in
just to share with
1989.
the group, it's amazing, there is a photograph of Baba and Meramai, and the construction is similar to that of an NPR.
Okay. The exposed brickwork and all that. Okay.
Yeah, the exposed brickwork, yes, absolutely. Even the
Mm.
internal brickwork, J Baba. The older
Yeah.
buildings on the estate were built around a charming garden and were painted a lively blue. The main house contained a large general living room, attractively furnished with easy chairs and couches, covered in blue, a piano and radio. The dining room had a long refectory table sitting 20 people. Several kitchens were well equipped. A suite of two rooms and bath was allotted to two of our Western group, and a large double room and bath for two others. The remainder of us lived in the new quarters. Adjoining the older bungalow was Baba's little room, bare except for an iron bed and chair. Next to it was a room for the boys, as he terms the Indian men. Beyond the house were the servants' quarters. Near the main house was a smaller one in which lived Rustam's wife, Freni, with her children and servants. I recall one particular incident of Baba's unparalleled thoughtfulness. The doorway to Norina's room was a little low, so Baba, thinking that she might bump her head against it, had ordered it to be carefully padded. His love seemed to have anticipated every need, every contingency. The tea table had been laid in the garden. There we sat with Baba as the sun was sinking in brilliant glory behind the distant hills. Penny was a gracious hostess, her lovely face radiant with the adoration for the master which poured from her expressive eyes. Her youngest child, at that time a boy of 5, was as beautiful a spark of God as one would ever find. His enormous dark eyes, gleaming with mischief one moment, almost hypnotized one the next with a deep, serious intensity. During most of the tea hour, he stood beside Baba's chair, stroking his hair and running his soft little hand across Baba's cheek and neck. Every now and then, the master would turn toward the little fellow with a look of great tenderness, and for a moment, the child would nestle closely in Baba's arms. At length, Baba gave us the signal to depart. Reluctantly, we bade him goodbye, but this time the separation would be only a brief one. In 3 days, he would be with us at Bhandardara.
Okay, we can rotate if you want to stop, or if you can read another page, please continue, Ashok.
Yeah, I can continue, but if somebody wants to,
Yeah.
I'll continue. I'll continue.
Please.
During our 2 week stay at Bandhavgarh, Baba visits us every few days, staying for few days at a time and then returning to Nasik or Mehrabad for a couple of days. On one of these visits, Baba spoke of one of his Indian women disciples who had been confined to one room for over 3 years in a state of trance. One of the Western women exclaimed, "How awful!" Baba looked up and smiled. "Not awful, wonderful. She enjoys perpetual bliss, but is at present unaware of the outer world. All of you will have the same bliss, but none of you will lose consciousness of the outer world, for you will experience bliss with knowledge." To the individual experiencing bliss, one state is as good as another, but the state you will enjoy will not impair your usefulness in the world. Some of you had brief periods of bliss, but they were mixed with pain of ignorance. The next day, Baba instructed us to meditate with the idea of making our minds a blank. When we reported what little success we had had, he explained how difficult, how practically impossible it is to still the mind by conscious effort. Yet only when the lower mind is permanently stilled can the state of God consciousness be permanently realized. When the limited mind disappears in the final union with the infinite, then the limited individuality is replaced by unlimited individuality. The soul not only is God conscious, but knows it, and in knowing it, preserves its individuality, which is now extinguished, which is not extinguished, but extended to an all comprehensive form.
I can pause you. Very powerful words in the last two lines,
Yes.
right? So when the limited mind disappears in the final union with the infinite, then the limited individuality is replaced by unlimited individuality. This is something, again, unique to Baba. I mean, we keep going back to this. The soul not only is God conscious, but knows it, and in knowing it, preserves its individuality, which is not extinguished, but extended. So it's a beautiful way of remembering. It's not extinguished, but extended to a all comprehensive form. Right. So just
Highlight this, and
I'm just doing that.
this reminds me of Manonash.
Correct.
The last week of our stay at Bernardana, Nadia Tolstoy and our friend Garrett arrived. Knowing how Gary's mind was seething with questions, Baba consented to answer a few of the more important ones concerning the spiritual life as exemplified and taught by the Master. Divinity is not devoid of humanity. It lifts the manhood and womanhood into God. Nor does spirituality necessarily imply the renunciation of worldly activities. True spirituality signifies the internal renunciation of mundane desires. Mere external renunciation, asceticism, does not lead to spirituality. Would you like to rotate the reading?
Yeah, just finish the paragraph and then we'll do that.
Yeah, okay. Perfection is a misnomer if it tries to escape from entanglement by shrinking from the dual expressions of nature. The perfect man must assert his dominion over all illusion, however attractive and however powerful. A perfect being functions with complete detachment in the midst of the most intense activity and in contact with all forms of life.
So again, if I pause you and also rotate, so if you see again here, what she quotes is, of course, Baba's words, and it's very clear. But even where she is writing, like this para here, it's her own language. She does not. I mean, she does not stray one bit from discourses and theme and Godspeed, and just gives a new way of understanding or describing the same things, which is very nice. So I found that jumping out multiple times in today's reading, and I really thank Jean for doing that. Yeah. So yeah, anybody is in a position to read? Mamaji has been quiet. Sunil, if you're okay, you can read.
I don't think I'll be able to read.
No problem.
Like
No problem.
next 15 minutes, I'm using my mobile.
Lot of disturbance here.
Let me continue then. No issues, no problem. Let me continue. And we
Okay,
will just
after
have a
15
few
minutes,
minutes.
after.
Yeah, no problem. Let me know when you're ready.
All right.
So yes. So I continue. Yeah, Baba. Later, when Garrett expressed surprise at Baba's keen sense of humor, the master reminded him that divinity includes all that is beautiful and gracious, and asked, how then could you expect a perfect being to be devoid of a sense of humor? Before we left for Nasik, Baba called us to him and indicated briefly how he would train us for participation in his future work. Every one of you has to help in my work according to your individual capacity, and the extent to which you will remain in the world will be determined by the kind of work which you are destined to perform. I will teach you how to move in the world, yet to be at all times in inward communication with me as the infinite being. As part of your training, you will have to experience both the comforts of Nasik and the discomforts of Mehrabad. We left Bandardhara on December 22nd, in one sense, reluctant to go, in another, eager to get settled in the quarters which Baba had told us would be ours for the next 5 years. This temporary sojourn had been a gracious introduction to our life in India. The physical beauty of the place was impregnated with a quality of timelessness to be found only in India. Surrounding the extensive lake which lay before us were towering mountain peaks rising majestically into the clouds. This region, Baba informed us, had been the abode of great rishis of the past, and it was easy to visualize those masters of wisdom wrapped in the silence which these mountains safeguarded. Untroubled by the illusion of time, they stood like sentinels of eternity, displaying in their outlines the archetypal forms from which man had derived his inspiration for a great pyramid, a cave temple of the Mayans, a Parthenon, or an Angkor Wat. Ashram days begin. At last, the Nashik ashram was completed and we moved in. With the arrival of the English group a week or so later, which included Kitty Davy, Margaret Krask, Delia De Leon, Tom Shapley, Will and Mary Beckett, and another week later, Ruanav Bogislav, our number was increased to 15. Baba assigned our rooms to us, showing us, as always, his wisdom in placing those people near together who could best further each other's development. He stood at the doorway of the storage room, which had been erected for our luggage, and personally supervised our unpacking, watching carefully that none of the women overtaxed their strength in the lifting of heavy baggage. On this very first day at Nasik began my particular Via Crucis, which was to continue throughout my stay in India. What I did not then realize, but now know to be true, is that the moment one becomes the recipient of a master's special attention, such as Baba gave to our group at Nasik, karmic forces converge with singular intensity upon the disciple. Whatever good or bad effects the individual soul has accumulated during its journey through time are brought to one's conscious attention in an unmistakable and perhaps painful way. Particularly, is one compelled by force of circumstance to rise above all negative reactions. By developing those spiritual qualities of courage and resilience, which subsequently are converted into power to be used in the service of the Master. What does Via Crucis in Latin mean?
This is exactly what I was thinking.
Look up Yeah. Via crucis is another term for the way of the cross. Okay, a lengthy and distressing or painful procedure. We embarked on a via crucis of tired comic formulae. So basically, her spiritual uh, intensification of the journey or whatever. That's what she's describing here. Here in India was a group of men and women drawn from many avenues of life. All were individuals with divergent and fully vocal opinions, highly charged with energy. All had egos which were yet far from having been eliminated. And since it is Baba's therapy to bring into the open whatever egoistic tendencies are hindering the free flow of God force in the soul, what a potential store of dynamite our ashram turned out to be. Since much of my karmic debris was working itself out through bodily illness and pain, it was inevitable that I should experience an intensification of physical disability. The one part of my body which had therefore been exempt from discord was now afflicted with almost continuous pain. The extreme tropical heat, which produces in most people lethargy or weakness, affected in me violent headaches which would last for days at a time with few intervals of relief. As I was trying to transcend the initial one, word came that we were all to meet in Baba's room. Of all the pains to which I had ever been subjected, this head pain was the most difficult to surmount because the mental effort involved seemed to accentuate the pain. This caused me to become more tense, more immersed in the disorder. Baba, of course, sensed at once my problem and used the occasion to drive home needed lessons, which I am afraid I did not accept very cheerfully. When either the mind or body are tired or in pain, the other reacts, he told us. Only the soul is able to remain aloof from such discomforts. That which is disturbed by these things is the limited I, the ego. This I wishes always to be comfortable and is therefore unnecessarily disturbed by the presence of pain. It considers unimportant things as important and vice versa. The body's needs, though of secondary importance, must of course be considered. Later, he elaborated on the same theme. I want you to lead a simple life here in India. Then, when you return to the West, you may resume your accustomed life there, yet you must be unaffected by either. In view of this, you may wonder why I have arranged these comforts for you. If I required you to sleep on the floor, for example, the body would rebel and in turn react upon the mind. Such sudden, drastic changes would make it difficult for me to impart truth to you through the mind. I will therefore gradually withdraw these comforts from you and later return them to you again. The world is slave to needs. The needs must become your slaves. I repeat, the world is slave to needs. The needs must become your slaves. You must learn to use your modern convenience, not be used by them. He also warned us that at first we might feel confused, tired, and restless, but we were not to be disturbed by these feelings. They would be merely the natural reaction of our minds and bodies to the transition we were making from west to the east. The east symbolizes the passive subjective aspect of consciousness, deeply introverted, in contrast to the active, conscious, extroverted attitude of the West. Such a radical change in environment would necessarily be strange and disquieting to us. For the first few weeks, we were free to map out our own daily program, except for two stipulations. We were expected to be punctual for meals, and we were pledged not to step beyond the confines of the 24-acre ashram property. Except for periodical excursions with Baba, the latter ruling remained in effect until his birthday on February 18th. Christmas party. On
I
Christmas
can take
morning,
over. Karthik, if
oh,
you
sure.
want.
Sure, please.
Okay. Christmas party. On Christmas morning, early, Baba came to our rooms to greet us with a special emanation of love and radiance. Not always does he mete out the same degree of love. He seems at times deliberately to withhold it, as Kabir say, "My Lord hides himself, and my Lord wonderfully reveals himself." But on this blessed morning, Baba poured himself out in the Christmas benediction upon us all. Shortly after the daybreak, devotees began to arrive to pay homage to the Master, and by 10 o'clock, the grounds were covered with groups of men, women, children, some of whom had traveled many miles on foot, others by car or train, intent upon seeing the beloved one. Meeting these ardent followers of the Master and seeing the deep love and reverence which they lavished upon him made us marvel anew at our unparalleled good fortune in being the recipients of his intimate care and guidance. Just before noon, two cars drove up before the community house. A few moments later, happy voices and excited greetings told us the English group had arrived. The childlike spontaneity of Kim Ko, as Baba calls them, especially endears these English disciples to the Master, and his face gleamed with loving welcome. In the evening, about 20 of us sat down to a beautifully decorated table with Baba at the head. Piled high before him were the gifts which we had unearthed from our trunks in the afternoon and made into an unlabeled packages for Baba to distribute. Some, of course, were marked especially for him. He would hold the package in his hand for a moment, as if determining its contents and its suitability for a particular person. Then, with a twinkle in his eye, he would designate the recipient. I recall that a bottle of Chanel number 5 came my way. The crowning
And
touch.
that was born the Secret Santa game, I believe. Right?
Yeah.
It was Christmas, and Baba was actually playing Secret Santa, but he was making the decisions of who gets the
Gets what? Yeah.
gift.
The crowning touch to the dinner was a speech by Kaka, whose droll English was just in the formative stage. Every moment of the meal was crowned with gaiety and high good humor, but at Kaka's speech, the house resounded with our laughter. Baba prefaced it by telling us that he had heard it read several times, but could make nothing out of it except that apparently Kaka didn't think much of marriage. One would have to know Kaka or hear him in action to appropriately fully the scene. He smiled good-naturedly at Baba's raillery, but very solemnly he earnestly and with terrific force, as though he were addressing an audience in a huge colosseum, he delivered his speech while Baba and the rest of us rocked with laughter. We agreed with Baba that it was difficult to know what it was all about. Only occasionally would we hear the word marriage, and judging from the violent emphasis he placed upon it, we gathered that he was somewhat dubious of the institution. Later, after having had our fun at good Kaka's expense, Baba pointed out that we Westerners would be brave indeed if after a few months of Urdu and in East Indian dialect, we would attempt to deliver a speech to native Indians. We heartily agreed. In this account of our Christmas Day in India, may be seen how simple and natural is life with Baba. Too simple, perhaps, for those who have not yet learned how to recapture the lost joys of childhood. Yet, in the words of the Master Jesus, we are told that it is just like just this childlike capacity for acceptance of the simple, unsophisticated joys of life that qualify one for the spiritual kingdom. Jai Baba. The God intoxicated. During our stay in India, Baba divided his time between his three ashrams: hours at Nashik for Westerners, Mehrabad for Eastern men and women disciples, and Rahori, where a refuge for the God intoxicated had recently been established. This work with the spiritually dazed is one of the newer phases of Baba's activity, as it is also one of the most important. About a year before our going to Baba, Baba initiated this symbolic and merciful service. He sent some of his disciples to the bazaars of the large cities and find a particular type of deranged men with whom he desired to work. He wanted especially those whose minds had become unbalanced by intense longing for God, or unguided yogic practices, or, as we would express it in Jungian terminology, those overwhelmed by archetypal experience. When these men were brought to Baba, he would ascertain immediately whether they were God mad, as he called them, or suffering from a derangement due to organic disease or other psychological causes. If among those brought to him were any in these latter categories, they were returned after a short period of treatment with new clothing and money. The God mad were ministered to by Baba at the Rauri ashram, an oasis of peace and protection in the jungle, symbolic of the service which the Master renders all those earth children who are wandering about the dazed and bewildered in the dangerous jungles of the unconscious. Baba's treatment of these spiritually dazed men is uniquely his own. He uses, as he always does, a physical medium to symbolize the spiritual benefit he renders them. One has only to watch his sacramental ritual of bathing, clothing, and feeding the mas, Indian name for mad. Okay, it's not Indian name for mad, or is it must
Yes.
is mad, or it's not?
Yeah, arguably, right? So must is slightly different in different languages, but we know the true meaning of must, which she of course describes in the earlier paragraph. And the Jungian reference is basically Carl Jung. I think she's talking about the philosopher and how archetypal archetypal experiences being passed for these god-mad souls. That's how she describes it. But well, we know a lot more thanks to Dawkins and his description in Wave.
Right.
Yeah,
It should be, we could use God intoxicated.
yeah, that would be perfect.
Perhaps, yeah. Okay, I'll repeat the sentence. One has only to watch his sacramental ritual of bathing, clothing, and feeding the mass to realize that something profound and significant is being accomplished through it. Baba pours tremendous concentration, unstinted love, and tenderness into his handling of these men, and they respond to him with the spontaneous adoration of little children. He never coerces them in any way, and if they were not in the mood to be bathed, fed, clothed, and none of them seems to enjoy being clothed, Baba sits by waiting patiently until he's given the go-ahead signal. Music.
Yeah.
Of the many who have received his spiritual benediction, the majority have been returned to their hometowns with their mental balance restored. Depending upon the degree of their spiritual readiness, they find their equilibrium on their present plane of consciousness, or are led by Baba to a higher and a safer plane beyond the dangerous psychic entanglements. If as in number of cases they had induced in themselves a state of consciousness for which they were not prepared by character development, then the master returned them to ordinary functioning and saw that they were helped to lead normal lives. I want to read this again. Depending upon the degree of their spiritual readiness, they find their equilibrium on their present plane of consciousness or are led by Baba to a higher and safer plane beyond dangerous psychic entanglements. If, as in a number of cases, they had induced in themselves a state of consciousness for which they were not prepared by character development, then the master returned them to ordinary functioning and saw that they were helped to lead normal lives. So,
This is again, respectfully, I would like to interrupt. This is again an example of delicately communicating what Baba has given in greater detail, right? So if you look at this paragraph, it's a beautiful way of understanding mas in a simple, sensitive, and delicate manner, right? This is all Baba did with mas, right? That's what we have understood.
Yeah. I just had one question. Is this referring to the fourth plane? Because we said that in the fourth plane, one can, if you just come to the previous paragraph.
No, but then it's not necessarily just the fourth plane. It could be any plane.
Yeah.
If, as in a number of cases, they had induced in themselves a state of consciousness for which they were not prepared. So maybe I'm in the second plane, I'm not ready for it. Baba puts me back to normal functioning and I lead a normal life after that.
What's interesting for me was there has to be a preparedness for a person being on a certain plane and prepared by character development. So if the character is not matching a particular plane, then you are ready for a demotion or a promotion, probably.
Even your wrongful promotion, and then
Yeah.
eventually with the help of a perfect master coming back, is also part of a plan. Or in limited sense, maybe misuse of your free will, right? So Baba doesn't say free will is there, right? So you just, but maybe you get excited about certain experiences and want to linger and move along in that path, and then Baba pulls you back. Could be the way we understand it.
Thing like that, yeah. Okay, I'll continue.
Sure.
When we had been in India for about 3 weeks, we paid our first visit to the Rauri Ashram, a place of utmost simplicity but great charm. Small huts made of matting with thatch roofs lined one side of the large tree-shaded compound. Baba's miniature house, which stood at the far end, was decorated with the symbols of four great world religions: Zoroastrian, Hindu, Mohammedan, and Christian. Especially One especially large banyan tree had a circular cement platform built around it. Here, some of the men were sitting as our cars drove up. Instantly on Baba's arrival, they grouped around him, their faces beaming with obvious delight at his return. These men, functioning as they do in the subjective world, have no intellectual obstruction to their spontaneous response to Baba's love. One of them, Mahmoud, a third plane must, informed us, would at that time sit for hours with his head and eyes down, unresponsive to anything or anyone except the master. To him, however, he reacted with childlike joy. Hours before Baba's arrival, he would predict his coming, and a year later, he was sent for by Baba to be taken to Europe. He told his disciple in charge of the ashram a week in advance that such a message would shortly come. When he finally arrived in Europe, we were astonished to see the change in him. He was alert to his surroundings, interested in new faces and environment, and particularly intrigued with his new Western clothes and shoes to which he called our special attention. He was obviously functioning in a totally new psychological world, about 75% more conscious of his environment than he had been when we saw him. He talked in his Indian dialect with Eastern disciples with no evidence of strain or embarrassment. Only when one of the disciples repeatedly asked him a question which annoyed him did he display any signs of maladjustment. He spit in the disciple's face. For the 3 months during which we were in Europe, Baba continued his daily ritual of bathing, clothing, and feeding Mahmud, whose consciousness, Baba informed us, was being raised to a higher plane. The derangement of the mus, Baba explains, differs from that of ordinary mad person, both in origin and nature. The latter rose their mental balance through disintegrating psychological or psychic cause of any ordinary kind. In the psychological field, disease of
Physiological. Both
physiological,
places it's physiological. Yeah.
physiological or psychic causes of an ordinary kind. In the physiological field, disease of some sort is the cause, while in the mental field, acute and apparently insoluble conflict between the deep-rooted instincts and man's conventional codes is the source of madness. In the case of the must, their state of unbalance is induced by their powerful urge to realize God. As the spiritual aspirant advances in his all-consuming desire to experience God, the mental structure with its normal tendencies and capacities is dissolved. The successful termination of this urge initiates the aspirant into supramental state of perfect integration and direct realization of the Supreme Self. Naturally, the method of treatment of the ordinary insane person and the God mad will differ. In the case of the former, the usual method consists in counteracting whatever physical causes may have contributed to the derangement. If a psychic origin is also involved, expert analysis helps to bring to the surface of the deep-rooted conflicts and complexes which have led to the mental breakdown. Unfortunately, the average analyst cannot give the patient the power to solve these problems. Though the analyst may exercise the utmost patience, gentleness, and understanding, unless he has the capacity to arouse the latent spiritual power of the patient, no cure is possible. It naturally follows that the ordinary analyst, who has little insight into spiritual realities, could hardly be expected to help the God mad, whose experiences and objectives are entirely beyond the range of his own experience or even imagination. Only a supreme master of consciousness can give them the help they so greatly need. With this discernment, he is able to appreciate both their spiritual yearning and their peculiar individual obstacles, and through the exercise of his spiritual power, he can advance them towards their goal or bring them back to their three-dimensional consciousness as their case requires. During the process of transcending the mind, one is subject to so much disturbance that the aspirant is unable to use his mind in the normal way and to all appearances behaves like a madman. But a master who has direct insight to the workings of the mind, knows the true cause and nature of the most peculiar mental condition. He knows precisely what spiritual motivation has induced this state of unbalance and is therefore able to help the must attain his goal in his own particular way. With such help, the spiritually based eventually emerge from a supranormal state of perfect integration and harmony.
We are out of time. Let me just see how big. Yeah, I think let's finish it.
The appearance
of balance. Yeah.
of balance, which the ordinary man possesses, is only provisional, and is due to his ability to strike a compromise between the warring elements in his psyche and his environment. However, in order that the mind may achieve a true balance, the provisional balance has to be considerably disturbed. When this happens without the supervision of a perfect master, a condition of apparent madness results. In early days at Rauri, Baba had thrown out hints to the effect that those madmen to whom he gave most attention represented the leading nations of the world, and that Mahmud to whom he gave special attention, represented Germany. These hints were given to the disciples before the war in Europe had started. If the consciousness of humanity as a whole is to be raised, as Baba foretells, then even those nations who have become obsessed by demons of the underworld, or in psychological terms, possessed by destructive archetypes, must participate in this regeneration. In the course of time, further significant phases of this particular work become more apparent to us. In February 1937, Baba again established a free Meher dispensary, this time at Rauri with Dr. Nilu Kodse in charge, assisted by Baba's younger brother Jao. About 200 patients were treated daily by Nilu and Jao, with Baba's sparing no expense for the treatment of their physical ailments and bestowing upon them the blessing of his divine presence and love. During the period, the sleepy little village of Rauri buzzed with the human activity as the hundreds of poor, sick pilgrims poured into dispensary. Those who came for physical relief departed with the added gift of spiritual benefit, according to their readiness to receive it. For in Baba's dealing with humanity, the physical and the spiritual go hand in hand. Even those close to him, most responsive to his spiritual touch, have experienced this dual aspect of healing technique which Baba employs.
By the way, I'm glad we went right through this whole section. I found this to be a master class in. If somebody asks me what is a must, who's not Baba's person, I will just refer to this now. This is somebody with a scientific mind, a medical mind can also relate to this. It brings out what Baba did with them, what the difference, and brings out the spiritual elements as well. This is a master class in definition of a must. I'm very pleased with this section. Super.
Agree. Yeah. It was very nice. Very
The previous paragraph, there is a reference which I did not understand. Must and say Muhammad and Germany or so.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So Baba has said. So yeah, Baba has said that. In fact, the two country associations that I remember is Muhammad being Germany and Chatti Baba being France, right? So this maybe is not covered in Wayfarers, you're right. But Baba has mentioned multiple places that what these musts experience are actually representative. I mean, they represent those countries in some way. So if the behavior of Muhammad and Chati Baba and those countries, I mean, those other musts around him were in a particular way, he would even go to the extent of saying this would show up tomorrow in the actual country, right? So the war may intensify or someone may lose and so on and so forth. And they will be very anxious, these musts who represent those countries. So this is recorded multiple places, right, Sanjay ji and Sunil and others who know about it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, as we were reading, just a small thing, I could dig out the pictures of that place where which was mentioned in Nasik.
Nasik.
But the
Great.
Rome's
Where
picture
did you put
somehow,
it here?
Rome's picture somehow I do not have. I have the picture of the bungalow which was referred, which had a big hall and some sofa and kitchen and all that. That I'll just share for reference. You know,
Are you going to share it here or are you going to?
I'll post it on the group. Yeah, not
Yeah,
now.
I'll just show it quickly. Oh, okay, later. No problem.
I'll post it. Yeah,
Oh.
post it.
Okay, okay.
And
Jai
the
Baba.
port said is in Egypt.
Oh, there's another port side in Egypt. Okay. Because there is a
Okay.
port side in Dubai as well. I mean, United Arab Emirates.
Mm-hmm.
And
No,
maybe
I
it was
just
called
checked
something
with
else then.
Google and showed that.
Okay, okay. Thank you.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Port Said is one of the older ports in UAE. And now, obviously, even now, it's one of the busiest ports. But you're right. Port Said is the famous trading port of Egypt, which is one side of the Suez Canal and was very, very important in the in history of trade and mercantile shipping. Correct.
Yeah. Also fall in the likely line of the ship that moved from there to India.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah.
Okay, so I know we went a little over, but I was so tempted to complete that section on must into a logical end because it was so beautiful. And yeah, great reading. Thanks so much for joining in and being part of it. I will
Baba.
stop recording now.
So we will